Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast, where we talk about what in the weeds people are seeing growing businesses and their revenue. Today, I am so excited to talk to Neeti, who has worked with a lot of businesses on exactly that. So thank you for being here today, Neeti.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Why don't you introduce yourself and give our audience a little bit of context about your background and what it is you do?
Sure. So my name is Neeti Patel. I run Mosaic Growth Solutions with a co-founder named Ben Scanlon. We mainly work with private companies that have received equity funding in the B2B SaaS space. We definitely have ventured outside of that space, but that seems to be our sweet spot. And I'll say the majority of companies we work with have been very successful, and that's why they've received the investment, but they've grown because of just strong product market fit and just kind of traditional sales motion. And in order for them to kind of get to the next level of success, and meet investor expectations, they need to start to drive more predictable, scalable growth quickly. And so they know that they need to do some sort of marketing-led growth motion, but they're not sure where to start and how to start. And so that's where we come in. And so Mosaic comes in and we work directly with the CEO and C-suite to really help them understand the potential of marketing, as well as create a strategic plan for 90 days through a year to help them really get the foundation that they need built and help get the momentum started in terms of marketing-led growth.
And before Mosaic, you have a background in the financial sector, right?
Yes.
How did that transition happen?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I have a background in financial services and specifically consumer credit cards, right?
Mm,
So nothing to do with what I'm doing now. I had a friend from business school call me up, 6 years, 7 years ago now, and said, "Hey, I just made an investment in Maryland. I live in Virginia." He's like, they're close together, right? I said, "Yep." And he said, "Well, I think that they need help with marketing." I'm like, "Great. What kind of company is it?" He said, "B2B SaaS." And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about that." I said, "I'm a consumer person. I don't know anything about technology and software." He said, "That's fine. He just wants to talk to someone who has any background in marketing." And so I ended up speaking to the CEO and was again very transparent in my background and my abilities. And he also said, "That's fine. Just want to get your thoughts and bounce things off of you." And so I started working at this B2B SaaS company, really thinking about the problems they were having as not B2B, but actually you're selling to a person, right? Even if it's a buyer at a company, it's still a person. And so a lot of the tactics and the strategies that I used on the consumer side did really convey to a B2B situation. And then when I kind of hit my limit in terms of my skill set, when it comes to like organic search and setting up paid campaigns, all things that I hadn't done, I pulled in my partner, Ben, who has a very complementary skill set. And so together we were able to work with this client to really help them grow and establish an inbound motion. They ended up selling much earlier than they had expected to at a very nice multiple. So that one engagement turned into, "Can we introduce you to a couple other portfolio companies?" which then kind of jump-started the business.
so you've been doing this for a while now.
Yes.
Is that how, over the next several years, is that primarily how you found your growth for your company, is through just finding investors and, working with their portfolio companies?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that once we kind of had success with a couple of companies within the private equity company that we were partnering with, we were like, we could probably apply this to other industries, other
Hmm.
verticals. So we did do a little exploration in B2C, B2B to B2C, and a lot of different models. We worked with like a beverage company that had equity funding, a retail company, but I think we realized that a lot of the leaders that we worked with really wanted someone who understood their business, and where our skill set really did translate across many different kind of industries and verticals. We found that we were most effective at building relationships and conveying our expertise if we narrowed our focus to B2B SaaS, and there's so much opportunity. We work in the mid-market space, so anywhere between like 10 and 25 million in revenue. And so by focusing on the space, we not only were able to continue to build out our expertise in a very specific way, but also gave us kind of an ICP or an ideal customer profile to go after. And so that's where we really drove a lot of growth. And so as we expanded over the years, and we started partnering with other private equity companies, but that's kind of what we were look for is, what size companies are they working with? Do they have a strong B2B SaaS focus? And a lot of PE firms today do have operating partners and teams where they have in-house expertise that they'll deploy to their portfolio companies. So obviously we were looking for those firms that didn't have that yet, so that our skill set would be of incremental value to them in their investment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's, I find, like what you guys found in your exploration, that even if you have transferable skills, right? And I've talked to a lot of small agencies and fractionals and those kinds of people where, like, well, running ads is running ads. We can run ads for anybody, right? But when you're in the founder seat or the CEO seat, you're looking at these people and I want somebody who understands me.
Yeah.
I want them to know who I am, right? And being able to demonstrate that easily is, I think, really key to that growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So B2B SaaS is a big space, right?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of different types of businesses out there, a lot of different types of software solutions. What, for the types of companies that you're working with in those spaces who, they're trying to take it to the next level, where do you start? How do you understand the differences in all these companies and where their opportunities are?
Yeah, absolutely. We created a proprietary assessment that we do. We call it a
Mm,
growth marketing assessment. Really allows us to understand not only the industry that these B2B companies are playing within, but also the assets and the strengths of the client themselves. A lot of them aren't doing a ton in the way of marketing, but they are doing something. And so really understanding what are they doing today and what's working for them. Also looking at what are your competitors doing? And more importantly, a lot of times, what are they not doing? Right. And really understanding the overall maturity of the space that these clients play in really surface some low hanging opportunities. It's obviously much harder if everyone's marketing game is up here, but for the most part, in many of these B2B SaaS industries, you're somewhere down here. There may be one player that's more sophisticated than the rest, but the lowest hanging opportunity is really taking up the space where nobody's playing yet. So whether that is upping your content game to drive organic search traffic, whether that is doing something interesting with your brand that nobody else is, but I think that it's looking for what's not happening and what are your assets as a company, and putting those two things together to find really the most efficient path to growth. So the assessment is really looking at, we come in, we ask them, what are your growth goals overall? Who are your competitors? We usually look at about 5 to 7 competitors in their space. And then we also, when possible, get access to their data, their Salesforce data, or whatever they're using to record their sales data, and start to really understand, what's driving demand today, where are they getting their deals from, what's working for them. And then we come out of that with a overall kind of, here's the state of the state. And then here is what your baseline performance looks like. And we've identified these 5 things that over the years of us doing this repeatedly, we know will drive this sort of impact to your bottom line. And this is where you can go with just building a foundational marketing strategy. And then at that point, we kind of get their buy-in and their agreement that that's the path forward. And then we'll stay on and help them execute. And also, ultimately help them hire someone who can take the playbook and run with it. So that's kind of, the assessment has been really eye-opening. And I will say, The process of going through the assessment, we make it very interactive and very involved. So it's not like we ask for everything up front. We come back 2 weeks later and we're like, here's what we found. We require and we actually ask all the leadership to commit to a weekly meeting where we get data, we tell them what we're seeing, we make sure it's resonating, we make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. And a lot of times, the discussion that starts to happen internally when we ask questions is a super valuable exercise, and often surfaces a lack of alignment, a lack of just, I'm not sure about that. And so that in and of itself is valuable for the company, plus kind of, the recommendations that come out of it.
That's spot on in my opinion, because I've seen a lot of, again, agencies and fractionals where there's the allure to streamline your process by creating a form that you just have the founder dump all their information in their files and their decks and just upload it. And then you get this nice treasure trove and we're going to go dig through it and we're going to analyze it. But what that misses is, I would say even more than half the value is getting the executives in the room through a guided discussion. Like
Yep.
that's especially in the early stages, that's such a big benefit.
It is. And it's, I will say, shocking how many companies don't do that on a regular basis. Like
Yep.
CEOs will have one-on-one with their executive teams. Maybe they'll have a leadership meeting every
Right.
like month to talk about the town hall that's coming up, but like
Yep.
a regular cadence of let's all make sure we're still marching in the same direction
Yep.
rarely happens because everyone's so focused on
Hmm.
results, 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 progress, progress, progress. And they kind of forget to take that moment to make sure that alignment is still intact.
Yeah. And there's getting aligned and then there's staying aligned.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
two different things, right?
Yeah. And then, yes, absolutely. And then there's also, a reality check when it comes to
Mm.
both of those things. It's like people think they're aligned and then they're not. And they're like, okay, great, we checked the box. And then it's also, really forcing people to revisit over and over again because things change very quickly, especially when in an organization that's trying to move so quickly.
Right. Right. And you've mentioned, as part of this alignment, you've mentioned this concept of a growth vision. And can
Yes.
you dig into that a little bit? What is that?
Yeah. So, I mean, you come out of these negotiations when you're signing a deal with a private equity company, and everyone's focused on this like number that you're supposed to reach in 3 to 5 years. It's usually 3 to 5x from where you are today. Everyone's like, great, all hands on deck. We're going to start marching towards that kind of goal. But whenever we sit down and I ask the question, okay, so that is where you're going. That's what success looks like in 3 to 5 years. How are you going to get there? Right. And these companies, a lot of them have many different opportunities to grow. That's why they're interesting to the investors. But if the team thinks it's product that's going to drive growth and the marketing team thinks it's all brand and and you only have a finite number of development resources, it becomes really tricky to make progress because then everyone's just kind of moving in different directions and your strategy all of a sudden is not coordinated at all. And there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of just kind of feeling like everyone's working really hard, but not making any progress. And so that's the part that I spend a lot of time on is what are the 3 or 4 things that you guys all agree are the lowest hanging, most efficient way to drive the growth that you're looking for. And I understand, situations change, things happen, you have to remain agile. But as long as you kind of start with the agreement and then have that periodic check in to make sure no one feels like perhaps we need to revisit those priorities, I think that makes a huge, huge difference. And then I also think it's another big kind of success factor that we tend to just bring attention to is the leadership team has been in all the meetings with the investors, right? Like they go to the dinner to celebrate the signing of the investment. But the rest of the team that's actually going to be executing and like realizing the success isn't in on all of that, right? And so a lot of times, like the leadership will come back and say, "Here's our goal, let's go," and the employees are like, can we actually achieve that? Like, where did that come from? Why are we all of a sudden trying to do this marketing thing where we were doing great before? Can we just do more of that? And I think there's also this idea of like creating the right culture and the right talk track and transparency within the organization at all levels to then be able to take that growth vision that you have now kind of aligned on as a leadership team and get buy-in from the rest of the organization so that there is this kind of feeling of we have to move quickly, but if we move quickly, this is what's going to happen and it's going to be great for all of us.
You have, there's a process of creating the vision, then there's the process of communicating that vision to everybody, and then repeating that vision. Because I think that's a part a lot of overlooked too is, all right, you said it once, that's not enough, right? You got to say it every day, every week, every repeat, remind that this is our goal, here's how we're achieving it. Are what we're talking about right now serving that goal?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that is another thing that when you're so focused on bottom line growth that like you're like, it's fine. We checked the box on this on the, January town hall and we showed them the goals
Right,
and we said,
right,
we made a commitment to building a great culture and that's going to be it. And it's so often just falls off the radar, especially when things ends up not going as planned. Then all of a
mhm,
sudden, when things are good, it's all good.
right,
It's when
right.
things take a turn for the worse that all of a sudden those things just fall off just in terms of priority, and
Yeah.
that's when you need it the most.
Right.
So,
That's when it actually has the most impact and the most
right.
benefit. You said something there too about, choosing the 3 or 4, priority levers for growth. And I wonder if you can give some examples of what the level of those priorities are. Is it choosing, we're going to be product led or sales led or marketing led, or is it at a much more tactical level of we're going to invest in SEO versus, viral product recommendations?
Yeah. So the way we kind of think about it is, especially from an inbound perspective, is really, how are you generating demand? So, how are you driving traffic to your website? What are the opportunities in terms of demand generation? So, maybe it is, we do get down to a pretty tactical level. So, maybe it is like we've never invested in paid, right? Maybe we start to explore like, what does a paid search strategy look like? Does this make sense for your company? What are your competitors doing? Are they investing in paid? What has the trends been in terms of their investment in paid? Have they continued to increase? And there are third-party sites that will give you all of this information. Or is it that you need a stronger content strategy because your organic search performance is just subpar? And there's a very formulaic way to improve your organic search performance vis-a-vis your competitors, right? You identify what your keywords are, and then you just make your content a little bit better than what's ranking. And so that's kind of what the exercise we go through from a demand generation perspective. And then some companies, it's like inbound is going to be really hard for you because the keywords that are associated with your business are not keywords that people don't think in those terms, right? And a lot of people don't realize they have a problem that your solution fixes or that a solution like this exists. So they wouldn't even know where to start. And so for those companies, it's like maybe we start to do a really tightly well-defined ABM strategy, an outbound strategy with the sales team. And so it's really understanding like, how are you going to get people to know about what you do? Then we look at, and this is more looking at benchmarks across the B2B SaaS industry, but we look at what your funnel looks like. So how are those leads? How's website traffic converting into leads? Is there an opportunity there to make some quick changes to your website and the experience on your website to really drive lead conversion rates up, right? And we'll look at things. I mean, we'll go to companies' websites and they'll have like one call to action button, like on the whole site. And they're wondering why they're not getting leads. And it's like, okay. So those are easy fixes that really start to drive a lot of impact. And then we'll look at what sales marketing and alignment looks like. And that gets a little bit deeper into the funnel. And that really needs a commitment from all levels and all cross-functional partners to say, this might be a problem that we
Yep.
need to fix, right?
Yep.
And so we look at how are these leads turning into MQLs, into opportunities, in even deals. I mean, marketing, obviously the influence gets less as you go down, but sometimes it's really very fundamental things that are wrong. Like we sit down and one of the first things we do when we go into an organization is check their attribution and tracking, because we want to make sure that we are able to prove our worth and impact. And so we need to know where we're starting from, and we need to trust the data. And everybody needs to trust the data.
Yep.
And so we often go through an exercise where we bring together the sales team and marketing team in a room, and we get a whiteboard and we start saying, okay, a lead comes in from here. Where is it going? Who's touching it? Who's seeing it? Where does it go next? And like I would say more than half the time, people are like, I don't know. I never even saw that lead. I didn't even know we were getting leads that way. And so, really just making sure that that is really well defined, and that the handoff is seamless between sales and marketing, or that whatever way they're interacting is full transparency, full visibility, and they're all working towards the same KPIs and goals. So that's kind of the way that we'll identify, the biggest priorities. And sometimes their sales, marketing to sales motion is great. Like the bottom of their funnel is working perfectly. And so we focus on just filling the funnel. But more often than not, we know what to do to fill the funnel, but there's leaks everywhere. And so you could shove as much as you want to the top of the funnel, but if they're not actually going through the funnel, then you're not going to see growth. So
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's kind of some of the ways that we'll evaluate where to focus our initial efforts.
Right. And so going back a little bit, when you were talking about the marketing assessment, you were talking about one aspect of that is, looking at 5 of the competitors. And I've found over the years there's a couple different types of CEOs, and there's one where they just go, I don't pay attention to the competitors because they don't matter. We're going to build the best product we can, and it's going to be awesome and great. Then there's another set that they're like, let's look at everything the competitor does and let's copy it, right?
Yeah.
With no understanding of why the competitor is doing that. But something interesting you said that I think is often overlooked by a lot of CEOs is, let's look at the competitors to figure out what they're not doing. And that right there is our easy opportunity. Because if nobody is serving this niche or this particular customer set, we can get in there really fast. And is
Yeah.
that a core part of what you guys are doing with that competitor research?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so our research is definitely not qualitative. Like we're not looking at how are they positioning their brand and what are their
Mm,
colors, and it's very quantitative. So we are looking at what does their organic search traffic look like? What does their investment in paid? What is their brand authority? We're using sites like uh, SEMrush to pull this data, right? And so it may not be 100% accurate, but directionally and comparatively, it's very, very telling. And so we're pulling hard numbers to say, here's where you're falling in terms of your organic search rank, right? And so it's really hard to argue with that when you're
yes,
like, I
yes.
have the best product, but no one can find it
Right.
because we haven't, developed organic search optimization strategy. And so that's definitely, I would say, like one of the easiest things to do looking at that data, especially in an industry where they're relatively immature, is to do a very simple content strategy to boost your organic search rankings. That's like the first thing we look at to see, are these competitors investing in organic performance at all? If not, like it is like an easy win,
Yep.
right? To just really drive that type of traffic to your website. Paid is a little bit trickier, but then there's also this idea of like brand authority, right? And that comes through in things like direct traffic and branded search. And we don't have all of the insight into competitors when it comes to that, but that is another lever that we look at. And we ask them, like, what are you doing to get your brand out there? Because that is one of the biggest indicators of future growth. And so
When
we
you're
definitely,
coming, no, go ahead.
no,
You
I was
finish
going
your
to say, I
thought.
mean, we definitely love working in the immature
Mm,
marketing space, and we have a scale that we use. And so, I mean, generally it's, everyone in the competitive space is usually relatively immature or just moderately mature when it comes to marketing. And maturity is measured based on, what channels are you using? How well coordinated are you across those channels? Do you have like a very clear strategy? How is some qualitative stuff around what's your product positioning like? Is it compelling? Is your website usable? Is it, have a ton of friction and you get on there and you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. So I'm going to get, so we do things like that to start to really understand and benchmark maturity.
yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it seems like a lot of your approach for the types of companies you're working with is getting clarity on what's going on within the company and within the industry. And that's a massive first step for a lot of companies.
It is. And I also like to say, I mean, like I said before, our goal is to become redundant, right? We want to hire
Mm,
a marketing leader full time for these companies. And a lot of those marketing leaders that are going to do what you need them to do don't want to deal with all of this,
mm,
like sorting
right.
through the data, making sure the data is accurate, especially a marketing leader, like making sure your attribution, because solving those problems is really, really hard. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the areas that we spend a lot of time on because
Mm,
we know that has to be right and we want to do it ourselves.
right.
And then once that's kind of working, then it's much more compelling of an
Hmm.
opportunity for the marketing leader to come in and say, great, I don't need to fix any of that HubSpot, Salesforce integration. And then the way
Right.
leads are flowing, now I can just focus on the marketing strategy. And so, yeah, I think it's super important. And very few companies have a meaningful view of marketing performance.
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, especially when you open up the can of worms like attribution and you get into that. It gets hairy really fast, and the amount of technical expertise that is required just keeps growing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why we have dedicated, you know, fractional CROs now, right? Like all they do is deal with this kind of trouble
Yeah.
because it's gotten so complex. When you're going into a new niche within an industry with like a new client, you're evaluating things like the SEO, the brand authority, how much traffic is going. How are you thinking about categorization of niches? Like that there's this endless question of like how niche is too niche, right? Like as you start with it's B2B manufacturing, but then it's healthcare manufacturing, but then it's orthopedic. Like how far down do you go, and how do you judge where that spot is?
For the client,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's a great question. We usually we ask the client this question. If you were to be the most trusted authority in a specific space, what would that space be for you? Right? And sometimes with the less creative clients, we'll say, if you were to teach a course on what your company does, like what would the course be called? Right? What is that like topic that's not too big? It's not English. Like
Right,
that would be really hard, but it's like literature, English literature, or like,
right.
what is the name of the course that you feel that you have expertise in, authority in, that you could teach? And that's kind of the way, I mean, it's not a super scientific way, but it really gets them to think about, well, my industry is really this big, but I think that we can be really successful in this piece of it. And then how do you articulate that piece that you can dominate? And that's kind of I think, the niche. And if it's too nichey, if it's too like in the weeds, then you don't have enough room to build a brand and authority because there's not that much to talk about. So you have to have something that is big enough that you have the opportunity to really establish your expertise, but not too big that, there's 100 other people who can talk on that subject as well.
Yeah. So I think one more main question here, and that is, um, with your experience in B2B SaaS over the last several years and the explorations you did into B2C, or when you were, doing credit services.
Yeah.
What do you think are the actual differences between marketing within B2B versus B2C?
Yeah. I mean,
What feels the most different?
I think the biggest thing is just the sales process, the amount of people who are involved in a decision at a B2B in a B2B sales situation is it makes it really complicated, and it makes it a lot harder to keep everyone engaged and make sure that you are attending to the needs and the questions and concerns of all the different stakeholders. So that's the biggest. So it's not very, some B2B SaaS can be transactional, especially like the product led growth stuff, but a lot of it is you have to understand, what is causing someone to even start to look for this type of solution, and then who else within the organization is going to be impacted by the purchase of this solution. And I'll say, not the buyer doesn't always think about that, right? And so they'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is great. And then when it comes down to the actual signing of the contract, all of a sudden this IT person is concerned about security, and the salesperson's unhappy with the decision, and and so it's not only you as a seller needs to understand what the whole buying center looks like, but you have to ensure that your buyer is also engaging with all the right people at the right time. And so I would say that that's the most complex piece of it. And in consumer, obviously there's still influencers and stuff, but it's a much smaller set of influencers. And then I think the other thing that is not that different, I mentioned this before, but I tend to really, a lot of our clients tend to forget this. No one's I won't say no one, because I'm sure there's a job like this, but most B2B buyers, that is not their full-time job. Unless they're in procurement, they are trying to solve a problem or or address an opportunity that will allow them, their teams, and their organizations to be more successful. So they have a day job. They're not just sitting there thinking about what else can I learn about, whatever software I'm trying to buy. And so you have to keep it in mind. At the end of the day, there's a person on the other side of that has their own goals and challenges and biases and personal issues and emotions and, all of the things that you see on the consumer side. And so I would say, you asked about differences, but I would say one similarity that is often overlooked is just the emotional side of B2B buying, especially in these organizations that just have had, really good products. They haven't had to really think about that. So that's one similarity that I think is
Yeah.
often forgotten.
And I think I'm gonna get this stat wrong because I'm terrible at remembering numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like 70% of B2B buyers have never bought a product in that category before, in your category before, and so they just don't know what they don't know, right?
Right.
And it's your
Right.
job to be that guide that helps them find their path through. And
Yeah.
I think the other one that, April Dunford always talks about when, talking about positioning is most B2B decisions end in no decision. Your main enemy is status quo, not a competitor.
Yes, 100%. But I will say to that, it's remember, these people are actual human beings, right? So they may have started the sales process on a day where emails were coming in slow,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden life happened.
Right.
Maybe they had a new project thrown at them, priorities
Hmm.
changed, the kid was sick, they went on
Yep.
vacation. You just don't know. You don't have that transparency. And so all of a sudden you think no response is they're not interested. And
Right.
it's no, it was just the timing didn't work out. You have to keep approaching these people who have originally showed interest in the product, because I would say chances are it's a timing thing,
Yep.
because again, no one's full-time job is buying software. So,
Yep. I
um,
I would love my full-time job to be spending people's money. That sounds pretty great,
exactly.
actually. Well, we're starting to come to the end here. And, one thing I have to ask everybody is how are you or are you not using AI in your day to day?
So I resisted AI for a long time. My husband is not in the same space as I am, but he saw a lot of the stuff I was doing, like helping clients write emails and blog posts and coming up with content ideas. And it was things that will obviously take a lot of time. And he's like, you really need to use ChatGPT. You really need to use it. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't have time to figure it out. And so I've resisted for so long. And then finally one day I was so fed up that I was like, fine, I'll see y'all play around with this. It was fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like life changing
Right.
just to get you start. For me, I use it just to get started, right?
Yep.
Like if I am like, here's what I want to talk about. I don't have the first sentence. I don't know how to like think about structuring this. And
Yep.
I put it in Chat GPT. All of a sudden, it's like, I, did- I'm 10% of the way there, which
Yep.
is usually the hardest part for me. And
Yep.
so I use it for content creation and my own content creation to build my own brand, but also my clients when I'm giving them suggestions, giving them kind of tactical, here's what you need to be writing about.
Right.
It's super useful.
That's awesome. That's really great. And I'm glad your husband was able to force it upon you
He
to see
didn't,
the
but he
light.
still told me, he said, Ben told you to use it and you tried it, but you could have been using this a long time ago. I was like, yeah, well,
Yeah, well.
it's about timing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's awesome. Well, I like to round out these and close them down with any recommendations that you have for the audience, books, newsletters, other podcasts, anything at all.
I do. It's actually not a book or a podcast. So I'm going to go off
I like it.
the path a little bit, but I would say that definitely invest in your brand
Mm,
online. Like a lot of CEOs are like, what? I don't have time to do that. I don't know how to do that. But I have seen tremendous value in CEOs really being vulnerable and being open and transparent
yep,
on LinkedIn. And not just
yep,
talking about work and business, but really
right.
talking about like lessons they've learned outside of work and insights and interesting things they've seen. And it's hard to get started because it's overwhelming, but I will say just start and do it regularly. And I find it to be like super fulfilling
Yep.
to do it myself, but I think that others find that it is a really great experience, and it also really helps to get them out there and get their companies out there and their brands out there.
I agree. And I think that's only going to become more important, not less important, given the way we can use AI now, given the way social media is now. It's only going to become more valuable, I think. And it's easier than it ever has been,
Right.
right? That
Right. It
there's no
is.
barrier to entry now.
No, like don't overthink it.
Yeah.
I overthought it for so long. And recently, I would say in the last just this year, I have really pushed myself to do it. And I'm like, okay, this is easy. Not
Mhm.
easy, but like it's not as scary as I thought it
Yep.
was. So
Yep.
definitely give it a shot.
And I would say too, for those CEOs and founders and those very analytical types out there who they need that, I need a concrete outcome for this. Well, I would say that there's actually a lot of benefit to using it as a forcing function to clarify your own thoughts. Because as soon as you sit down to write a post or you're going to record a video like this, you now have to put your amorphous thoughts into concrete words and share it. And you're going to
Yes.
quickly realize that I've just been rambling for 5 minutes because I don't actually understand my thought. And now, after my rambling, I do, and I can re-record it in 1 minute thought, right? And
Yeah.
that is, as an executive who's busy, like that is extremely valuable because you get paid for your clarity of thought, for making decisions, right?
Yeah. And communicating them effectively. I
Mhm.
love that. I love that.
So, well, this has been an absolute blast. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Are there any other closing words you wanted to share?
No, I enjoyed this as well and look forward to hearing feedback.
Absolutely. Well, I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did, and leave comments, and we'll leave contact info for Neeti, of course, in the description and link to her LinkedIn. So everybody go give us all a follow. All right. Thank you again, Neeti.
Thanks.